12:35 on February 29th, 2024. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I'm excited to be on this committee with you. We have some new staff with us today, so I'd like to introduce them. My committee legislative assistant, Michaela Montanis, is with us. The committee administrator is Beth Johnson. We have Tom Cheetah is not new to the Senate, but I understand he is new to this role as researcher for this committee. And our pages for this session are Spencer Olson and Luke Suck. I think I got that right. So welcome and thank you to staff. We all depend on our staff so much. I was on State Gov back in 2012 for a year, and look forward to having these thoughtful conversations as we go forward. Today we are hearing some veterans bills, and we'll hear an update from the Department of Veterans Affairs on their bonding proposals. We plan to lay over these bills for possible inclusion into a veterans omnibus bill. We have a few other veterans bills, so at least have one other committee just dedicated to veterans. So I'm doing this meeting from the doctor's office, and I can't really make out who is at the table. So I'm gonna turn it over while Senator Mitchell is presenting her bill. I'm gonna turn it over to Senator McQuaid because I truly can't make out who's at the table. So if they have questions, I'm going to turn it over to Senator McQuaid, and then Vice Chair Mitchell can take over once she's done presenting her bill. So thank you, everybody, and good to see you.
Thank you, Madam.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Mitchell, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. I'm honored today to present Senate File 3876, a bill which will allow counties to appropriate aid to military service persons organizations for the purposes of Veterans Day and Memorial Day exercises. This is a chance to help us celebrate that commitment and patriotism to those who've stepped forward to serve their country and let communities have more autonomy to do that in their own special local ways. Growing up in a military family and I'm now serving over 30 years in the Air National Guard. I've served along some incredibly brave, dedicated service members, and this is one of the places where our country's diversity is most visible and essential, and it's really a testament to bringing people together from all walks of life. This bill gives our local counties the ability to celebrate their Veterans Day and service members in their own ways. It highlights unique achievements and contributions of their community members. I've been part of Memorial and Veterans Day ceremonies around the state of Minnesota, including in my own community of Woodbury, and I enjoy that opportunity to highlight the service of those in my own community. The importance of celebration and remembering service to our members cannot be understated, including public recognition and dedicated. So again, I would ask for this to be considered for possible inclusion and allow this to give those counties more flexibility. A quick summary of the bill: it would allow county board members to appropriate no more than $300 each year to service persons organizations to pay for those expenses.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell, and I should say that you move your bill, Senate File 3876, before the committee, and we do have quorum. You have a testifier with you today?
Yes.
John Baker, please come to the desk. Make sure you sign in, state your name for the record, and you may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Senator, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Mitchell. My name is John Baker. I want to introduce myself to this committee. To begin with, I am the new Executive Director of the Minnesota Association of County Veteran Service Officers. The legislature last year appropriated money to the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs to hire for this position. So I am the first Executive Director. I'm retired United States Marine Corps and a lawyer and a a retired professor at St. Cloud State. So I am here representing Minnesota Association of County Veteran Service Officers. All 87 counties have a county veteran service officer, as you all know, and we have about 165 county veteran service officers throughout the state of Minnesota, and they are the individuals that are in the counties that are asked to participate in Veterans Day and Memorial Day. So we definitely support this bill and assisting our CVSOs working with the veteran service organizations to celebrate our fellow veterans, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. That's all for your testifiers, Senator
Yes,
Mitchell?
thank you.
Members, questions for the bill author? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Mitchell, or to your testifier, this bill here is similar to another bill that's on the agenda, and I'm wondering if you can differentiate between the two bills that are before us, the 3876 and 3743.
Senator Mitchell
Okay.
or Mr. Baker?
Senator, thank you, and Senator Anderson. So, and I will be testifying supporting Senator Weber's bill later on here this afternoon. And I will note that there are two different statutes that these two different bills address. This particular bill authorizes $300 to be given out to a veteran service organization, just like we do with Memorial Day. So we're just changing that. So what Senator Weber's bill is, that's under a different statute, and that would get rid of the cap on the amount that counties can appropriate for Memorial Day, which we also support as well. And then it also, I'm getting to the bill here, my apologies. So, and it would also appropriate funds annually to each post of a recognized service organization. So there would be no cap on that. So essentially, Senator Weber's bill is no cap. There is just a $300 allotment in this particular bill. And then there's an additional change to another statute in Senator Weber's bill.
So,
Senator Anderson, follow-up?
thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Mitchell, why would we want to continue with a cap? If one bill is looking to defray or get rid of, and your bill is continuing to keep the $300 cap?
Senator Mitchell.
So more can be spent, sorry, Madam Chair, and Senator Anderson, so more could be spent, but this is what the county board would be able to add into that. So if there were other ways that they wanted to spend the money, if there were other means of getting that money in, it would allow still other resources to come in, and then there would not be a cap on that.
Senator Anderson, follow-up?
Thank you.
Okay. Members, any other questions? Okay, and with that, Senate File 3876 is laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. Thank you so much, Senator Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next up, we have Senate File 3452, excuse me, Senator Gustafson's bill. She moves that before this committee.
Madam Chair?
Oh, Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are all these bills going to be laid over? Do you know?
Senator Anderson, I believe, yes, they are all going to be laid over.
All be laid over?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And
You said my name, right? Senator Gustafson, thank you so much for stepping forward. Would you please proceed with a description of your bill?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So hello, Chair, committee members. Thank you. Thank you for hearing SF 3452. It's a very short, simple bill, but we've been hearing during the interim from our vets in my district that it's one of the top changes that we'd like to make this session. A simple language fix. It has much support from our veteran community, and it should be a fairly simple and easy thing for all of us to agree on and pass here today. Senate File 3452 adds county veteran service officers to the list of individuals who are currently exempt from having to pay fees when requesting various vital service records. Current statute exempts veterans, next of kin, and veteran service officers chartered by Congress, but given the important role our county veteran service officers play in Minnesota, they deserve the same exemption. Again, the bill is a simple fix. I know many of you on this committee have been hearing about it in your districts as well. I hope that you will join me in supporting Senate File 3452.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. I believe you have a testifier. Mr. Baker, would you come back up, please?
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Baker, could you please state your name each time for the record, if that's okay, and then proceed?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you very much. Again, my name is John Baker. I am the Executive Director of the Minnesota Association of County Veteran Service Officers. And this bill is another one of our bills that we are particularly interested in. One of my jobs as I'm coming into this new role is to identify gaps, but also barriers for veterans getting veterans disability. So one of the primary roles of my county veteran service officers is to obtain and start the process for veterans getting veterans disability through the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is unique, by the way. Our county veteran service officers are one of the few county workers that do work directly on behalf of a federal agency. And we don't get funding from that federal agency, which is something that we were in Congress a couple weeks ago asking for more funding as an aside. So a veteran, when they go to a county veteran service officer or a veteran service officer to start their disability benefits, it can take anywhere from 6 months to several years. I've been through that process. Many of you have been through that process as well. It can be a painfully long process. And currently under state law, a county veteran service officer who would likely have provided a DD 214 to the county recorder's office has to turn around then again and pay for that to be able to get a veteran their disability benefits. So this is just one of those, what I would call a technical fix, and would allow a county veteran service officer to get those vital records without having to pay for them. Now, many county veteran service officers have good relationships, working relationships with their county recorders, and this is not a barrier. For others, it is. So this is our work that I look at as reducing one of those barriers for a veteran getting disability benefits. So whatever little things that we can find to reduce those barriers, that's what we're doing. This is one of them that we've done, and I appreciate Senator Gustafson, the sponsor of the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Do we have any questions on the bill? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Baker, how many other states have this provision as far as allowing these vital records to be not an impairment as far as they're doing their work? Sounds like I'm wondering where Minnesota is in relationship to other states being able to help our veterans.
Mr. Baker.
Madam Chair, Senator Anderson, so I think you had two questions in there, Senator. The last one was, how do we do compared to other CVSOs around the nation? We pride ourselves in having the national model. We do it the Minnesota way. I was just in D.C. a couple weeks ago for the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers, their annual leadership/legislative convention. And actually, the president of the National Association is one of our county veteran service officers, Chris Hinton from Minnesota, and the legislative director is also from Minnesota. So we do the Minnesota way. And so this was my first time out there finding out how other states do different things, and we have some of the best CVSOs in the nation, but we have this one little hiccup, and I didn't hear as I was talking to other states that they have this same issue as a barrier for CVSOs getting records from their county recorders. And as you know, states do that differently as well, but we're one of the few states that still have this statute, so reducing this will bring us up to speed with most of the rest of the states. Senator Anderson, thank you for the question.
I know my
Madam Chair.
stepdad's CVSO, he's working with, he has nothing but glowing things to say about that individual. So thank you for the work everyone is doing on those. Any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Baker, we have been kind of the sore thumb right now as far as this issue, kind of the Lone Ranger not having any support from, but now this will fix the problem. Am I correct?
Mr. Baker.
Madam Chair, Senator Anderson, yes, this will fix that problem. Again, not all CVSOs get told that they have to pay for them, because many recorders, they don't follow the state law on that, and they understanding that this CVSOs should get these government documents to begin with, these documents for individual service members.
Thank you. Senator Lang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, actually. It's kind of a, what are they paying the fees to? I suppose they came out of the County Veteran Service Officer budget, but doesn't it go right back to the county then? So it was a weird, had to have been some sort of a strange transaction between two county agencies. I'm assuming the fiscal is zero, because even when you were paying it, it was zero. So now we're talking about not paying it, so it's got to be zero, right?
Mr. Baker.
Madam Chair, Senator Lang, yeah, I don't believe there's a fiscal note attached to this bill, neither in the House either. And if there is any fiscal note, it's de minimis. But Senator Lang, that was my exact issue when this was brought to my attention. I said, well, taxpayers are paying for this anyway. So it's when you say a CVSO budget, one of the issues I have with a CVSO budget is several different layers. The legislature through the MDVA provides grants for them, but their salary for the most part and anything else that they're going to do with their office is paid for by county taxpayers. Which is, we're working on the CVSO Act at the federal level to provide federal funding for CVSOs across the nation, and we're hoping that that's going to get passed sometime soon, and we'll take some of that burden off of the taxpayer, the property, and this is property tax that pays for that. So CVSOs, it's an interesting dynamic that they play in our counties, where they essentially are they work for the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs, but they're hired by the counties, and then they're trained by the MDVA and the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers. So I know that's a long way of answering your question, but I thought you'd want to hear all of that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the explanation. Seeing no other questions, this will be Senate File 3452 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you so much, Senator Gustafson, for bringing this forward. Next on the agenda is Senator Weber's bill, which is Senate File 3743. Senator Weber, if you could please, you're already on the way.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'm pleased to present to you today Senate File 3743. The reason for this bill came about as a result of a request from one of the county commissioners in my district. My Senate district includes all or parts of 9 counties, so I have a lot of county commissioners to work with. But he asked the question, why are we limited to being able to contribute only $300 to our veteran service organizations to celebrate Memorial Day? And so my LA did some research and visited with Ms. White, and no one can really tell why the limit of $300 was placed on there. Other than when the authorizing legislation was made many, many years ago, that they felt that there must have to be a number there. And so I have included in this bill the removal of the dollar limitation that county governments can make for this purpose. And the reason that I've done that is twofold. I don't know how the Legion and VFW posts in the metro area are doing in terms of membership, but in rural Minnesota, many of them are diminishing in numbers. They're also having great struggles in affording their post buildings. And in fact, in Laverne, for example, we used to have a Legion post building, we used to have a VFW post building, and neither one exists today. And so it has become increasingly difficult for them to continue raising money, and quite frankly, when you put on an event such as a Memorial Day or with the inclusion of Veterans Day, I would hope that this provision would be extended to that as well. You know, you usually, if you try to cover mileage costs or to have an outside speaker come in, if you wish to buy refreshments for those that are in attendance, with the costs of everything today, $300 doesn't go very far. And so that is why I made the effort to just remove that limitation. Plus, our county governments know what they can afford and can't afford, and sometimes I believe we try to regulate local governments too much. And so that was the purpose behind my bill, and so with that, I also have our testifier, Mr. Baker, here to speak in regards to this bill.
Mr. Baker, you know the routine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, on this bill, my name is John Baker. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Association of County Veteran Service Officer, MACVSO for the abbreviation. I will note, and Senator Anderson asked on the chair's bill, I will add that one of the differences is in the Madam Chair's bill is that it adds Veterans Day to that. This is to remove the cap for Memorial Day funding. It has nothing to do with Veterans Day. So that's where these two bills are separate, in my opinion.
With that clarification, do we have any questions? Okay. See no questions. Thank you so much, Senator Weber. Senate File 3743 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Sweet and easy. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Senator Anderson?
I take it that since we're laying these bills over, they're going to be in an omnibus bill, and I know from the Commander's Task Force that they have been requesting from across the state that we have a standalone omnibus veterans bill, that it's clean just for veterans. Is that your intention, or is that going to be, these going to be included in the state and local government omnibus bill?
Yes. Senator Anderson, not the chair of the committee. I happen to have the gavel today, but the intention, if there is a policy bill, would be to have that separate. Oh, and Senator Dietzick is online. Senator Dietzick?
Yeah, the plan is to have separate veterans bills, separate from generic state and local gov bill.
Thank you, Senator Dietzick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Now then, Senator Hauschild, you are the last bill on the agenda with Senate File 3950, although, of course, we will be leaving time at the end for a bonding presentation for MDVA. Senator Hauschild, proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the State and Local Government and Veterans Committee. Today I have for you consideration Senate File 3950, a bill establishing an annual observation of the 1st Minnesota Day. The 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment was a Union infantry regiment active during the American Civil War. The 1st Minnesota participated in the battles of First Bull Run, Antietam, and the Battle of Gettysburg. The regimental battle flag of the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Infantry Regiment consists of one layer of blue silk with a gold fringe border, with the Minnesota state motto in gold pigment beneath is painted red ribbon reading 1st Minnesota Volunteers. Two gold shields list the battles fought by the 1st Minnesota prior to April of 1863, when the flag was presented to the regiment by Governor Alexander Ramsey during his visit to the field. This bill establishes that each year a proclamation be issued from the governor's office honoring the observance. Schools are encouraged to offer instructions on the role of the 1st Minnesota Regiment, and on July 2nd of each year, a replica flag be flown on the state capitol. The 1st Minnesota Regiment has a history that all Minnesotans can be proud of, and I'm honored to present this bill in support of our state's veterans. With that, I'd like to thank Chair Dietzick and the committee members for their time, and I do have one testifier who would like to express their interest in this bill.
Thank you. If the testifier could please come forward. Mr. Schweiger, I believe? Oh, on
Yes,
Zoom.
thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you all today. I'm speaking in behalf of this bill, and I would just like to offer a brief history on the 1st Minnesota for those of you that may not know the importance of this regiment and why we're asking for this bill to be passed today. On April 14th, 1861, Fort Sumter fell to Confederate forces. Incidentally, on that day, Minnesota Governor Alexander Ramsey was in Washington, D.C. Upon hearing of the news, Ramsey rushed to the White House, where he met with President Abraham Lincoln. Ramsey offered to send troops to the Union, making Minnesota the very first state to commit troops to fight for the Union Army. Word spread quickly of Ramsey's offer, and men from all across Minnesota rushed to enlist. On April 29, 1861, the 1st Minnesota Regiment was officially formed at Fort Snelling, becoming the 1st Brigade, 2nd Division, 2nd Corps of the Army of the Potomac. On the morning of July 2, 1863, the soldiers of the 1st Minnesota arrived in Gettysburg and took the field at approximately 5:40 a.m. They spent most of the day guarding an artillery battalion on top of Cemetery Ridge. However, as the day progressed, the 3rd Corps, under General Sickles, began suffering heavy losses further down the Union line in the areas now referred to as the Peach Orchard, the Wheat Field, and Devil's Den. Union forces from Cemetery Ridge were forced to reinforce Sickles and fill the gaps before his lines collapsed. Unfortunately, this reinforcement from the Cemetery Ridge caused a temporary gap in the center of the Union line on the ridge. General Longstreet, a Confederate general, saw this gap and sought to exploit it. He ordered General Wilcox and 5 full regiments, a battalion consisting of approximately 1,500 Alabamans, to break the line on Cemetery Ridge. General Hancock saw the Confederate troops marching towards his line and saw the gap. He immediately sent dispatch runners requesting more reinforcements, but he needed to immediately fill that gap in his lines before those reinforcements arrived. He desperately searched for men and saw Colonel Colville of the 1st Minnesota. He rode over to the colonel and said, "What unit is this?" Colville replied, "This is the 1st Minnesota, sir." Hancock then said, "Do you see those colors coming towards us?" Colville replied, "Yes, sir." General Hancock then pointed at the approaching Confederate flags and said, "Colonel, take those colors." Colonel Colville later wrote in his memoirs that every man knew that the order of attack was suicide, that they would be attacking and sacrificing themselves and the regiment. Yet every man rose to the call without objection, because they knew if they failed, their line would break, their left flank would be encircled by the Confederates, and they would lose the battlefield. Every man saw and understood the necessity of their sacrifice, wrote Colville. The Minnesotans formed their ranks. They fixed bayonets, and they marched double time across the field. General Hancock later wrote in his novel that he was amazed at the discipline and bravery of those Minnesotans. 262 Minnesotans charged the 8th Alabama, the 9th Alabama, the 10th Alabama, the 11th Alabama, and the 14th Alabama. They were outnumbered 5-1. Yet they crossed nearly 800 yards of open fields down to Plum Run and threw themselves into the Confederate lines. The battle raged for approximately 15 minutes with fierce hand-to-hand combat. The Minnesotans fought with such ferocity that the Alabamans eventually retreated, and the Confederate General Wilcox requested reinforcements to help fight off the Minnesotans. Minnesota succeeded in breaking the Confederate charge, but at a significantly high cost. The Minnesotans suffered an 82% casualty rate that day. Of the 262 soldiers that took the field, 215 were killed during the charge. When the fighting was over, only 47 Minnesotans, proudly carrying the flag of the 1st Minnesota, returned back to the Union lines. They showed exceptional bravery and sacrifice that day and bought the crucial time needed for the Union Army to preserve the line. And not only that, they turned the tide of the battle on that day at Gettysburg. The following day, on July 3rd, the Minnesotans were called yet again to defend the Union line on Cemetery Ridge, fighting off General Pickett's charge. On that day, 2 Minnesotans, Sherman Marshall and Henry O'Brien, were awarded Minnesota's 1st and 2nd Congressional Medals of Honor for their exceptional bravery on the battlefield that day. By passing this bill, we will honor those men on that day and remember and acknowledge the crucial role that they played for Minnesota and for the United States on that day. I believe that we will install a sense of pride and connection to our state's past among the current and future generations of Minnesotans. This bill will also help us allow to teach our children and future generations about the sacrifices made by those brave soldiers and the importance of preserving and understanding our history. By commemorating their actions, we ensure that their legacy will live on and hopefully inspire future generations to value and support our nation's freedoms. Therefore, Senators, I humbly ask for your support on this bill, and I would briefly like to thank Senator Grant Hauschild for authoring this bill, Dr. David Meyer for his research, Dr. Jeff Sheriff for his authorship of the last full measure, and of course the Minnesota Historical Society, along with Gary Elderman of the American Battlefield Trust. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Hauschild, anything else before I open it for questions?
Madam Chair, I don't think I can say it any better than my constituent, Mr. Schweiger, so I'll leave it with that.
He did an excellent job. Thank you. Do we have any questions about the bill? Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't know if I had the right microphone. I'm in a different place here. So I passed out a copy of the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Regiment flag, the battle flag that our 1st Minnesota, our brave 1st Minnesota Regiment, where 82% of them died, carried into battle. And I'm going to read just a passage from the Minnesota Historical Society website about it from the battle flags of Minnesota. Anna Ramsey, wife of Governor Alexander Ramsey, on behalf of the St. Paul ladies, presented this color to the regiment as they were assembled at the First State Capitol building on May 25th, 1861. On one side of the flag, encircled by 34 stars, was painted a state seal with the words, 1st Regiment Minnesota Volunteers. The reverse side had a painted federal eagle with the words E pluribus unum. The flag was made by Horseman's Brothers, a military goods supplier in Philadelphia. So, members, Senator Hauschild, this is the flag that they carried into battle with them. And if you look closely at the flag, and this is the flag you have referenced in your bill to hang up at the state capitol, which I think is a great idea. It's also the flag that is the precursor to this flag that we have now, the Minnesota flag. You'll see elements in here that are very similar to the elements in the Minnesota state flag, including the farmer. He had shoes on his feet back then. I don't know who took his shoes off, but somewhere along the line, his shoes came off. I don't know if that's a Native American in the background, but certainly the St. Anthony Falls there, I believe that is very prominent as well, as is our state motto, which is on the flag. And this is actually a hand-painted seal, state seal from that time in 1861. And many of those elements are on our current flag, the state seal, the farmer and the plow and the Native American, those are all on here. But I'm just curious, and I love your bill, Senator, but I'm curious, are you willing to allow us to look at options to keep these elements of history alive in our state flag? Because the commission that met Senator Hauschild wants this to be our state flag instead of our current state flag that does honor and carry many of the elements from the 1st Minnesota Regiment with it. Are you going to help us in making certain that we can keep that history alive in our state flag as well?
Thank you. Senator?
Longest question of the month, Madam Chair.
Do you promise that? Well, it's the last day, so I guess it is. I was like, could you promise that? Senator Hauschild.
Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, this bill is about honoring our veterans. It's about honoring Minnesota's history. We just heard the testimony of how incredible those Minnesotans' actions were during the Civil War. I think it's extremely inappropriate to inject politics into this issue, and I'm disappointed in that. So, no, Senator Drazkowski, I won't talk about the change to the state flag. I'm talking about the 1st Minnesota flag and honoring our veterans, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Hauschild.
Madam Chair.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Hauschild, I didn't expect anything different, but I too am in favor of honoring our veterans and the history around them. And unfortunately, simply by placing their battle flag up the flagpole once a year falls way, way short. And instead, we're simultaneously bringing forward policy in this state that the majority passed last year and rendered before us on the 31st of December was the Flag Commission's report, which through all of those elements of history and the 1st Minnesota that was part of that is part of our seal and our flag, and threw them out the window and replaced them with this. Senator, I hope you'll join us when we have that discussion later in session. But again, I like your bill, but we need to do even better than that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Senator Drazkowski, this is a question we'll take offline, but I'm just curious what you think those storm clouds represent on the horizon and the flag just later. But is it witty and intelligent?
Just reminding the gentleman, we have another presentation today.
Okay. I did offer to take it offline. So line 113 in your bill, schools are encouraged to offer instruction on the role of the 1st Minnesota Regiment during the Civil War. I love that clause C in the bill. Unfortunately, schools aren't in session on July 2nd to honor that clause in there. So either A, I'd like to take it out, or B, my suggestion is maybe we should have school come back together on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and could use those 4 days to celebrate all those wonderful things that make Minnesota, our accomplishments at Gettysburg and our accomplishments on July 4th, 1776, and make it 4 days of patriotic fervor and all the wonderful things that are happening in our schools, and just come back to celebrate all these things that we forget about because it's summer and it's picnics and parades and balloons and ponies, and be nice to be in the classroom studying these things when they're on the anniversaries of the actual events. So anyways, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hauschild, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Swedzinski. Certainly, I think the intention here is, of course, to encourage our schools to honor the 1st Regiment. The way I'm reading this, it looks like there are dates for particular observances, and C under 1.13 is simply saying, in general, encourage schools to honor it. So I think we're okay on the dates.
Thank you. Are there any other? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, in regards to Senator Swedzinski's request of maybe looking at July 2nd, maybe because it was mentioned by your constituent or the person that testified, he mentioned May 25th, 1861 as part of a presentation. And that's kind of at the end of school year, and using that as the date for recognizing what our military did at that time, maybe that's an option that you might want to consider as a possible amendment or change in the legislation going forward. So just food for thought.
Were there any other questions, amendments, or any other comment on this bill? With that said, Senator Hauschild, would you like to say anything in closing?
No, Madam Chair, I think this has been a great discussion about honoring our veterans and our history. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
With that, Senate File 3950 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you for your time. And the last item on the agenda is a bonding presentation from MDVA. Senator Pappas has asked that all the committees review the bonding requests from agencies in their jurisdiction. Ben Johnson, welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair?
Senator Anderson.
Would there be time at the end of this presentation to ask further questions from the chairs as we go forward in our committee process?
I will get back to you with that after the presentation, if that's okay, Senator Anderson.
Well, the chair's online. I'd just like to know if she's open to questions after the presentation.
And I will get back to you as soon as we've got Ben waiting, so I would like him to be able to present, please. Yes, please. Mr. Johnson, are you ready?
Chair, members of the committee, yes. I have the presentation here. I have not fit tested the connection to the presentation in the room here. So
We have some wonderful pages.
thank you. I would welcome any assistance from your wonderful pages.
Would any wonderful page or anyone that's familiar with the technology, looky there. Okay.
Thank you.
Proceed, please. If you could please state your name and position for the record to start.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Mitchell, members of the committee, my name is Ben Johnson. I am Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs Legislative Director. I am also currently the Interim Deputy Commissioner for Programs and Services for the agency. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about some critical infrastructure needs MDVA has identified. I've handed out a copy of a one-pager with specific details about both of our items for this coming session, and I welcome the opportunity again to talk to you about some very important items. So again, the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, we serve Minnesota's veterans and their dependents and survivors by connecting with them the benefits that they have earned. Currently in the state of Minnesota, we have just under 300,000 veterans and their dependents, and we work with them every day. We heard some commentary and some testimony about CVSOs. Those are some of our primary partners in this very important mission, serving Minnesota veterans down to the county level and all the way to the federal level. We have two items on the agenda for this coming session. One is a very specific focus on asset preservation. The second is some infrastructure for Building 16 at Minneapolis. The Minnesota Veterans Home at Minneapolis is home to 3 different service models. We have skilled nursing, adult day, and critically, our domiciliary program has an annex at that location as well. And for your awareness, we believe it's the only Veterans Home campus in the entire country that has all 3 models of care offered in one location. Some background information. I do want to talk about the approach to asset preservation. I don't like to read slides. There's a lot of information there, and I'm happy to provide a copy of this. But for your awareness, really, the big picture here is strong investments now reduce future costs. Got some details about encumbrances, and we have been very successful with your partnership in the last decade and a half in securing asset preservation, either during regular bonding sessions or during the off years when there's some makeup to be done. I believe between 2008 and last year, the agency in total has secured nearly $33 million in asset preservation funding. But you'll see later that we have identified some critical infrastructure, some ones and twos for those who are aware of the process, the facility condition assessments that happen throughout the state of Minnesota, not just with MDVA, but all state entities. They go through a process of an analysis determining which projects are where in the spectrum of need. Ones and twos are either failure or critical or poor. Those are the areas that we have targeted for this year. And really, the goal is to, again, reduce the backlog of some of the serious deferred maintenance needs and ensure service delivery for all of our residents and veterans. And this goes on to talk a little bit about how those priorities are established and identified. So for your awareness, we are a statewide organization, and with the opening of our 3 newest veterans homes in Bemidji, Montevideo, and Preston, all of which within the last 6 weeks have introduced or welcomed a first group of new veterans. So each of those locations are online, serving between 20 and 25 residents at each. The goal there is to establish our battle rhythm, as it were, and then secure federal survey results, get those surveys done so that we can begin giving access to more and more veterans at those locations. You can also see our location up on the northeast in Silver Bay, to the southwest in Laverne. Over in Preston, we have 2 locations, both a state veterans cemetery and our new veterans home, as well as locations out in Fergus Falls, Montevideo, Hastings, and Minneapolis in the middle of the state there. So we truly are a statewide organization and have the capability to serve veterans in all corners of the state. For our first presentation, our first priority is a total of $12.8 million in asset preservation. This is improvements at state veteran cemeteries and veterans homes in Minneapolis, Hastings, Fergus Falls, Silver Bay, and Laverne. Again, those are the locations that have been in place the longest. In fact, Minneapolis, we're speaking about the Civil War. I don't know that our initial group of residents at the Minneapolis home, which opened in 1884, may or may not have included members of the 1st Minnesota. It would not surprise me in the least if that was the case. But we do have infrastructure currently in use that dates back at least 100 years. The asset preservation requests are in essence to renovate and replace components agency-wide. These are buildings throughout the state and address building systems and components that have exceeded their intended useful life. Got a few examples and some details about what we manage in the state of Minnesota. So for reference, 1.4 million square feet in now 71 buildings. This slide I neglected to update. It says 9 of them have 24/7 operations. Now with the inclusion of 3 new veterans homes, it is 12. 12 of our homes or locations have 24/7 occupancy, staffing, and individuals living in them around the clock. And current replacement value is estimated at $496 million. And the critical component here is that we need to ensure these facilities are in good shape to take care of our 700+ residents and to continue to offer them the best service and quality of life as we can. And then, as I've heard it described in a number of places, asset preservation is not the bright, shiny, brand new building on a mountain or a hillside like we have in Preston or out in the plains in Montevideo, beautiful area. These are the less glamorous items, similar to changing the oil on your car. These are not things that are all that glamorous, but are essential to the facilities and to the building system components that are essential in making sure that we are offering the best quality of life for our residents, making sure that staff are safe, and making sure that the guests of our residents come to a place that is welcoming. I will include one specific item I think that is important. You'll note in the handout on the back side, in the blue, we've got some items that have been identified. This backlog of preservations are where we do not address these needs, facilities continue to deteriorate and things become much more expensive. And that last sentence I think is critical. In the absence of appropriate maintenance, failures can occur, hazards of life and safety of our residents, guests, and staff. And critically, it forces the agency into unplanned expenditures. So where we don't have capital investment or asset preservation available, we need to pivot into operational funding, which is a whole other process. As Mr. Erickson knows, it is not an easy task to use operational funds to do asset preservation or critical repairs, but it is a process that we will have to take if we aren't able to secure support for these asset preservation dollars. A little more concise here is Building 16. So Building 16 was initially constructed in 1970. We did do a renovation in 2013, and notably, items on the asset preservation list do not include this building. Building 16 is a standalone project because we identified so many significant needs there that instead of doing piecemeal asset preservation projects line by line, the goal here is to do a complete design and remodel of that campus, of that building on the Minneapolis Veterans Home campus. We are grateful for the support you offered last year for the Hastings domiciliary program location. We are currently in the design stage of that overhaul. That is our primary campus for the DOMS program. But the DOMS program does have this annex at Minneapolis that we are interested in continuing to support. It is a preferred residence for some of our DOMS program veterans. We want to continue to offer them the best quality of care and life. As noted in this third bullet, the HVAC system was the periodic failure that caused us to start digging into this building more expediently or more thoughtfully. And expedience in this case is that we believe the Building 16 needs to meet the residents where they're at, rather than doing asset preservation on project by project. This is a full remodel of that location. Again, for your awareness, this is the southernmost building on the Minneapolis campus. It is at the confluence of Minnehaha Creek and the Mississippi River. It is downslope and downstream from the rest of the campus, and as a result, we have had significant issues with water intrusion, things flowing down the hill, and so a major overhaul is necessary. That is my final slide. I'm happy to answer any questions related to asset preservation or capital investment in general. I also look forward to the opportunity to be back in front of you with some critical policy initiatives that we're looking to get your support for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I just have to say, I was able to tour some of these places in the off season, as I know several of us were, and I just think Minnesota really does a lovely job at a lot of the facilities. Some of the new veterans' homes are just absolutely beautiful. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Chair.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Johnson?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
Chair.
Anderson.
It says in your request here, project summary, talks about the veterans, and it says veterans may face many challenges, including translating their military skills, experiences to civilian occupations, and mental fatigue and physical injuries. And in relationship to that, the domiciliary there, Senator Coran and I visited several of the domiciliaries, and some of this, what is said here, was very definitely related to regarding the individuals that lived in these domiciliaries as far as their concerns about what was going on. Do you know if that any of those that information was related to the hearing, the committee hearing that was put in place last session to talk about as it relates to the concerns for these individual members, veterans, and their spouses?
Mr. Johnson.
Chair Mitchell, Senator Anderson, thank you for the question. Yes, we believe that the physical space that these veterans live in, that they call home, has a definite impact on the quality of life and their experiences there. So again, grateful for the contribution to the commitment to the Hastings campus as the primary location for the domiciliary program. We believe that an investment at the Minneapolis location is merited as well. And I would note that we did fulfill the obligations of that mandate to hold the domiciliary working group to talk about the quality of care and the method in which we deliver the quality of care for our residents. That is available. We submitted a report as well as copies of the agendas and meeting information to the Senate and to the House per statute back on January 16th. We also have available copies of the report and recommendations, as well as recordings of those hearings are on the legislative website at MDVA. And I'd be happy to share that with the committee for access, so that if members would like to follow along and see what the group of exceptional subject matter experts had to say about how we offer care to take care of our residents, I would be happy to share that with the committee.
Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson, oh my.
Regarding what you were just talking about, have you been asked to come and testify on behalf of that committee here in our committee?
Mr. Johnson.
Chair Mitchell, Senator Anderson, yes, I've been in contact with both the previous committee administrator as well as Ms. Johnston to make sure that we do have an opportunity to come and present those recommendations. I will be coordinating with the members of the working group that are not state employees, that were volunteers for that working group, and make sure that we have the right people in the room to offer testimony and their observations about those recommendations.
So, Madam Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Johnson, so you're looking forward to coming and testifying here in our committee shortly?
Mr. Johnson.
Chair Mitchell, yeah, always.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson, for your time.
Thank you, Chair, members.
With that, the answer, Senator Anderson, to your question is that Chair Dietzick has another commitment and is not available, but she is always available for questions via email. With that said, thank you so much, members, for your work here today. Our plan is next week to meet Tuesday and Thursdays in our regular time and location, and the committee administrator will be in touch more about that specific agenda soon. With that said, the committee is adjourned.